Publishers are absolutely terrified, quote, preserved video games would be used for recreational purposes, so the US Copyright Office has struck down a major effort for game preservation. The VGHF argues that around 87% of all video games released in the US before 2010 are now out of print, and the only legal way to access those games now is through the occasionally exorbitant prices and often failing hardware that defines the retro gaming market. And certainly the operative word there is legally, because I know for a fact that the majority of my audience is going to hoist those colors high and begin sailing the high seas yet again as they pirate more digital copies. And while as a YouTuber I obviously can't condone any illegal activity, I can certainly see why a lot of you are feeling that way. Hello fellow travelers and welcome to the Hard Light Network. Alrighty guys, today we have a bit of a sad story as archivists everywhere face another loss in the legal battlefield. If you guys have been following me for any period of time, you know that I've always been interested in archiving older media. And it's not just about the sense of nostalgia that these works provide, but the preservation of the medium as a whole. However, archivists everywhere face a seemingly endless uphill legal battle as publishers seem hell-bent on destroying the legacy of these older titles. But before we get into it guys, I wanted to ask you for your help in expanding and preserving the legacy of this channel by hitting that like button, subscribing so you don't miss out on any of the content I have coming up for you guys, and also leaving your thoughts in the comments below. Also, if you would like to go the extra mile in supporting this channel, there is a super thanks option down below. But that being said, let's get into today's article. An article which comes to us from Games Radar and is entitled Publishers are absolutely terrified, quote, preserved video games would be used for recreational purposes, so the US Copyright Office has struck down a major effort for game preservation. But before we get into this article guys, just as a quick aside, is there some sort of law that I'm unaware of preventing these authors from writing snappy titles for these articles? There's got to be some sort of reasonable explanation for why the title of nearly every article that I read is a paragraph long. Anyway, back to the article. Quote, a 3-year fight to help support game preservation has come to a sad end today. The U.S. Copyright Office has denied a request for a DMCA exemption that would allow libraries to remotely share digital access to preserve video games. For the past 3 years, the Video Game History Foundation has been supporting the Software Preservation Network, SPN, on a petition to allow libraries and archives to remotely share digital access to out-of-print video games in their collections. VGF explains in its statement, under the current anti-circumvention rules in Section 1201 of the DMCA, libraries and archives are unable to break copyright protections on games in order to make them remotely accessible to researchers. Essentially, this exemption would open up the possibility of a digital library where historians and researchers could check out digital games that run through emulators. The VGHF argues that around 87% of all video games released in the US before 2010 are now out of print, and the only legal way to access those games now is through the occasionally exorbitant prices and often failing hardware that defines the retro gaming market. And certainly the operative word there is legally, because I know for a fact that the majority of my audience is going to hoist those colors high and begin sailing the high seas yet again as they pirate more digital copies. As the last few videos on my channel covering the licensing and DRM restrictions that companies are now putting in place on these games, several of you made it aware that these restrictions are only going to be a slight speed bump on your path to enjoying these titles. And while as a YouTuber I obviously can't condone any illegal activity, I can certainly see why a lot of you are feeling that way. Increased restrictions like this really only hurt paying customers and by extension the gaming industry as a whole. And for the life of me, I honestly can't see how these publishers don't see this as a long-term net negative. Not only are they limiting their pool of paying customers, they're outright incentivizing piracy. Because while suing emulators might net these companies a couple million, good luck trying to sue some 16-year-old kid with a Tor browser. Still, the US Copyright Office has said no. The Register concludes that proponents did not show that removing the single-user limitation for preserved computer programs or permitting off-premises access to video games are likely to be non-infringing. According to the final ruling, she also notes the greater risk of market harm with removing the video game exemption's premises limitation, given the market for legacy video games. That ruling cites the belief of the Entertainment Software Association and other industry lobby groups that there would be a significant risk that preserved video games would be used for recreational purposes. We cannot, of course, entertain the notion that researchers enjoy their subjects for even a moment. More importantly, this also ignores the fact that libraries already lend out digital versions of more traditional media like books and movies to everyday people for what can only be described as recreational purposes. And of course, this is true. My wife has become somewhat of an avid reader lately, and she's constantly going to the library to check out new books. And while we do have several dozen books in our collection at home, it just doesn't make economic sense for us to buy every single book that she's interested in. Having access to this publicly funded library makes it easy for her to experience new books and then open up the potential for us to buy them later to add to our collection. Hell, there are even some libraries that allow you to check out video games as well. These institutions are vital for the preservation of physical media, and there definitely needs to be a digital counterpart. And before all the 10,000 IQ geniuses start spurging out in the comments section about how the distribution of physical media is fundamentally different from digital media, bear with me for just a second. There are ways for companies to monetize on this sort of system. Publishers could work out some sort of deal where they opt in to allow their titles to be digitally preserved. And because this hypothetical digital library would not function as your typical game rental service, there would be no expectation for modern games to be on there. The focus of such a platform would be for digital media preservation, so it wouldn't make much sense to have the newest AAA titles available for checkout. And since these titles can maintain profitability for years after their initial release date, with the release of DLCs, collector's editions, and even sequels driving interest in the original product, publishers could choose to opt into the service after the life cycle of their product is complete. Once their initial audience loses interest 20 to 30 years later and it becomes a niche title, then they could archive their product so it's not simply lost to the sands of time. To me, it sounds like a win-win, with the company retaining ownership over their IP and the customer retaining access to a product that they love. And with the code and tech for this product preserved, these companies could then revisit these products in the future for a remastered edition. But anyway, guys, let's finish up this article and get our final thoughts on it. Members of the VGHF are naturally unhappy with the decision. Unfortunately, lobbying efforts by the rights holder groups continue to hold back progress. The group says in its statement, noting the ESA's absolutist position that it would not support a similar sort of copyright reform under any circumstances. Quote, "I am proud of the work we and the orgs we partnered with did to try and change copyright law," VGHF founder and director Frank Cifaldi said on Twitter. "We really gave it our all. I can't see what else we could have done. This fails the needs of citizens in favor of a weak sauce argument from the industry, and it's really disappointing." And as one of those citizens, I couldn't agree more. This honestly feels like a textbook situation of greed getting in the way of a practical solution. And it is especially demoralizing to learn that 87% of classic video games are critically endangered. I know that a lot of you guys out there care about the preservation of this medium that we love so much, and if you want to support them, there is a link in the description to the Video Game History Foundation's donation box. I'm not sponsored by them nor affiliated with them in any way. I just genuinely believe that they're doing an important work. But for the other people in the audience, the people who aren't gamers, the people who think it may be a little silly to worry about the loss of these video games, for one, I appreciate you watching up to this point, but I want you to understand that the reason why I care so much about the preservation of this medium is not just because of how long that I've been a gamer. Growing up, some of my best memories were formed with late-night, pizza-fueled gaming marathons with my friends and siblings. Trading physical copies, discussing lore and tips and tricks, and out-competing each other was all part of the culture. We've even used video games as a means of resolving problems with each other, using it as a backdrop to hash out our issues in the chat. I still have videos saved on my computer of times where I was playing video games with friends who have passed away. And even if it is in some small way, if it wasn't for Halo, Call of Duty, or Super Smash Brothers, those memories wouldn't exist. But of course, it isn't just about preserving the nostalgia of the past, it's also about sharing those experiences with people in the future. One of the most insane things for me to think about is how I played Minecraft when I was a kid, and now my kids are old enough to play the same game with me. So yeah, while it fills me with sadness knowing that only 13% of video game history is even survived up to this day, I've got hope knowing that if we really do care enough about it, we can change that. But of course, that's going to do it for for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching up to this point. I really do appreciate it. And if you can, please hit that subscribe button and don't forget to leave a comment with your thoughts down below. Do you have a core memory associated with gaming? What about a friend group that used to gather around a common interest? Hell, do you think that this is really silly and you think it's better for games to die off? Regardless of what you think, I want to see it in the comments section. And as always, thank you guys for watching. If you liked the video, leave a like, and until next time, love you guys, safe travels.